Hello, everybody. My name is Jack Sheehan, and I'm a partner and head of the regional tax group at DFDL. I'd like to welcome everybody today to our webinar on the key legal and tax considerations for investing in Bangladesh. Before we start our presentations, just some basic housekeeping rules. If you've got any questions, we've allocated some time at the end of the presentation to be able to answer those questions for you. And if you look at the top of your screen, you will see a Q&A where it says Q&A. You can actually post your questions in there. You can either type the questions in there, and then we will go through them in the Q&A session. So before we move on, just a quick update on DFDL. Some of you are probably aware, if it's your first time joining us today, so we're a regional legal and tax firm with offices across Southeast Asia and Bangladesh. We've recently opened a new office in Malaysia, so we've almost completed the full ASEAN network. A quick introduction to my colleagues. I'm joined today by my colleagues. Shahwar Nizam is our partner and our country managing director in Bangladesh. Shahwar has extensive experience on advising on all aspects of mergers and acquisitions, energy, infrastructure in Bangladesh. Shahwar had also previously worked in Singapore, and Shahwar qualified as a barrister in the UK, where he is qualified to practice in England and Wales. I'm also joined by Farhan. Farhan Kabir is a senior tax advisor, and Farhan has extensive experience on advising on the tax aspects of mergers, acquisitions, corporate tax planning, transfer pricings, and tax incentives in Bangladesh. Farhan has also represented numerous multinational clients in front of the tax authorities regarding tax assessments in Bangladesh. Farhan is a fully qualified member of the ACCA, the Associate of Chartered Certified Accountants, and Farhan will talk us through the second half regarding the tax aspects of investing in Bangladesh. So next slide, please. So I'll hand it over to Shahwar now, and so Shahwar, maybe you can start the legal presentation.
Thank you very much, Jack. Thanks everyone for joining this webinar. This will be hopefully the first of a series of webinars that we will do on legal and tax issues in Bangladesh. Many of you may have already worked with us on legal issues, but we are very pleased today to be able to offer tax advisory services as well. And hopefully this will be the first of many informative webinars that we can present to you. So just as an introduction, as Jack mentioned, that we're part of the DFDL network, and we have been in Bangladesh since 2012. We have grown from a small firm to a relatively big-sized office here in Dhaka with a team of 42 people, among them 27 lawyers. And we started off working mostly on the energy and infrastructure projects, advising on cross-border elements, lending, project development, and also investments. But over the last 5 to 6 years, we've seen an increasing trend in M&A opportunities, investments and joint ventures from strategic investors as well as institutional investors. And notably in the last 1.5 to 2 years, we have significant interest from private equity funds, the big name global private equity funds, and we have closed a number of pretty interesting deals for them as well. Right now, we have we have our plate full with quite a diverse type of investment works, both from strategic investors from the East, from Asia, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, and others, as well as institutional investors from the West. And also we are seeing some more regional players looking to do business in Bangladesh, enter the Bangladesh market, and we are assisting them on regular day-to-day matters as well. So as a firm, we have experience in all of this, so it's quite a wide-ranging practice. And hopefully with the tax practice, we should be able to do more in the future. Next slide, please. So before we jump in on the legal and regulatory framework, I just wanted to give a brief picture of what we are talking about. For those who have not really had a lot of interactions on Bangladesh, it's not really been a country that many people knew until very recently. If you Google Bangladesh, most of the time you would see pictures of floods and natural calamities and these naked children running around, but that's not the case anymore. Bangladesh as a country has grown significantly in terms of its population as well as economic might, and it is considered to be one of the top fastest growing economies in the world, and it will become one of the top 20 economies very soon. So what exactly is it all about? It's, as you can see from the map, and the slide, it's a relatively small country with a very big population. Official population is 172 million, but we know unofficially it's somewhere around 175 to 177, right? And because it's a relatively small land space, it is very densely populated. I mean, the capital is Dhaka, and those of you who have not been, it's a how can I say? It's an overload on all your senses. Like it's a big city with 25 million plus people jam-packed in a small space. A lot of traffic, a lot of people, a lot of construction, a lot of development. As you come out of the airport, you will see the elevated expressways being developed. Part of it is already running, by the way, and a lot of construction and development works going on. GDP growth rate up until 2022 was very, very good. We've had somewhere around 6 to 7% year-on-year growth for the last 5 to 7 years. And this year we are facing some challenges given the Ukraine war, the commodity price hike, as well as the dollar price hike. We've had some issues with all of those, and as a result, the economy is not growing as fast, but it's still sort of on a growth trajectory. And over the next 10 years, you will see a lot of developments and a lot of growth in many different sectors. The government is a democratic, parliamentary style democracy with the elections happening every 5 years. And right now we are at close to the end of a term, and we are probably looking at an election in the first week of January. The most interesting thing that I want to talk about first, next slide please, Fateh, is the legal system. The last point in the previous slide and the first point in this slide is exactly that. What many people don't appreciate is that Bangladesh is a very English common law based jurisdiction. What does that mean? That means that a lot of things that you all may be familiar with in terms of doing business in many developed countries, many developed jurisdictions like London, to some extent New York, Singapore, Hong Kong, you can do a lot of those things, or you can replicate a lot of these things from a structural perspective in Bangladesh, because the legal system is very similar. And if you look at the ways, some of the basic business laws like contract law, the company law, all of these things are very English common law based. So from a conceptual perspective, if you have done businesses in any common law jurisdiction, it should be very familiar to you. So the concept of contracts, debts, security, all of these are very, very similar. And that's, I think, the biggest positive for a country like Bangladesh, for any foreign investor that is looking to do business here. The other aspect is that if you have done business in this region, South and Southeast Asia, you will be surprised to hear that Bangladesh probably has the most foreign investor friendly set of regulations in the whole region. I mean, I have done works, having worked in Singapore and other places. I've done works across the region, and it is quite a surprise. It comes as quite a big surprise to many institutional and other investors to find out that in Bangladesh there is no specific FDI restriction. So, except for a few protected sectors like military, firearms, and things like that, and a few regulated sectors where you have some local shareholding requirements, in almost every other sector, foreigners can own up to 100%. Specifically in the industrial sector, unless you're manufacturing thinking of manufacturing firearms and bullets and things like that, you can have 100% foreign-owned factories in Bangladesh. And that is quite a significant thing that has propelled the development of a lot of the infrastructure projects. So for projects like power and roads and others, where there is issue of land and other things, because foreign owners can own up to 100%, and there is no restriction on land. There is restriction in the sense that individually foreigners cannot own land, but a 100% foreign-owned company can still own land, because from a legal perspective, that company is a Bangladesh entity. So these are very important elements that has made Bangladesh a very good investment proposition and has helped develop a lot of projects and a lot of transactions over the years, over the last 10 to 15 years. And now we are seeing a big volume of transactions coming in and a big volume of deals coming in as people are finding out more about it. In terms of investment protection, Bangladesh has a very clear set of laws that protect foreign investors. I mean, I'm going to go talk about it in the next slide. But for now, what I want to talk about is that there is also a dedicated government body that is created to help foreign investors do Bangladesh, and they have their own jurisdiction, they have their own set of regulations, and it's called BIDA, Bangladesh Investment Development Authority, and they are the main purpose of setting them up, or their operation is to help foreign investors in Bangladesh navigating, setting up, and all other things. So from a legal and regulatory perspective, if you look at all of these things as a whole, it is a very attractive set of regime for foreign investors. And that's how the government has been wanting to be portrayed at. And just one small thing which is not mentioned in the slides, recently we saw more liberalizations happening, in particular the telecom sector, which used to be a highly regulated sector. It's still regulated in the sense that there is a Bangladesh Telecom Regulatory Authority, strictly regulates a lot of things, but they have withdrawn all local shareholding requirements for all licensed entities, or all entities that will be licensed by BTRC. So now all those entities can be 100% foreign owned. So that's, I think, a very big indication to the international investor community. And also the other point is that the regulatory framework is pretty well established. It has been quite common. The government concession styles, the way this has been done from the beginning, from the mid-90s, we have seen the development of the power and infrastructure sector. We have seen a number of road and expressway projects develop. So the whole concession and contractual framework has been quite consistent. And now we have the new PPP regime. Well, it's relatively new. It's been around for more than 10 years. And now we are seeing the set of projects coming out. Now, what's interesting is that the whole PPP regime and the model contract templates were all developed with the assistance of the likes of IFC and ADB. And they came in with international consultants, international law firms, and others. So now what we have as an end product is a good set of regulatory regime with a good set of contractual templates, which is very likely to become quite usable and attractive to international investors or international sponsors looking to do projects in Bangladesh. Now, having said a lot of the positives, now let's talk about the nitty-gritties, because life is not always a bed of roses, right? So there are factors to consider. There are a few things that you need to be aware of. The first thing is that it's still an emerging market. So you cannot expect the same level of advancements in the way the regulators are, in the way the government bodies are, as you would see in developed countries like Singapore or UK and everywhere else. It's still developing, it's still emerging. So the level of sophistication, level of understanding, level of coordination between the government authorities are still sometimes challenging and sometimes difficult to navigate. Also, in terms of practicalities, even though the contractual framework, the concession agreements often seem very nice and very bankable and very they're providing a lot of protections. In reality, sometimes getting those to workable level can become challenging. I mean, there are, for example, one particular issue related to tax is stamp duties. While we have seen a lot of the concession agreements say that stamp duties are exempted from certain things, in practice, you still have to go and get that exemption from certain bodies. Insurances for foreign projects and things like that. You still have to go and navigate through the local regulators and go apply for approvals. And sometimes those become challenging and time consuming. So that's the other factor that we always advise clients on. That you need to have enough lead time for a lot of these approvals, and just because certain things are allowed or given in contracts, that doesn't mean that you will automatically get that. You still need to figure out how they will work on a practical level. The other big issue that we always advise clients on beforehand is the foreign exchange control restrictions. Bangladesh is still one of the countries that has a legal regime that restricts convertibility, and the Bangladesh currency taka is not freely convertible. Capital accounts and current accounts restrictions are still there. And on a practical level, what that translates to is that remitting money outside Bangladesh, from Bangladesh to outside, is a challenge. Having said that, there are no restrictions on repatriation of dividends, and there are set procedures for certain payments, but still it's what really scares some of the foreign investors is the fact that it is not freely remittable. It's not freely convertible. You cannot just send money as you wish. There are certain procedures, there are certain exemptions. You have to go through that, you have to follow that when you need to set up money. I mean, despite those restrictions, we have seen tons and tons of foreign investors, foreign projects being done, a lot of projects successfully implemented with international investors, with international lenders. And and we have seen a number of large foreign companies entering Bangladesh in the recent times and successfully remitting dividends, repatriating profits, and all of these things. And so I think overall it's still workable. It is there. So my advice to foreign investors or lenders is that keep in mind that those are there, figure out how to work, and figure out how to navigate them. It's not something to be freaked out or getting very worked out about. Now, coming back to investment protection, as I mentioned, that we have specific laws such as the Foreign Investment Protection and Promotion Act of 1980, and that clearly says that clearly protects foreign investors from nationalization and expropriation and guarantees non-discriminatory compensation, non-discriminatory treatment and compensation in the event any of these things happens. I'm happy to say that since 1980 to 2023, we have not seen any instance of this law being used for any particular matter. The next point is that Bangladesh, we have seen a lot of investment treaty issues. We have had successful implementation of treaty awards, whether from ICSID or other ICCs. And the thing is that Bangladesh is a party to the New York Convention. So that means that international arbitration awards are directly enforceable in Bangladesh. We have a 2001 Arbitration Act that clearly sets out the ways the arbitration awards are going to be enforced, and that law is based on the convention. So it basically replicates the law. So if you're familiar with the way international arbitration works in other countries, it should be the same in Bangladesh. The only thing is that because of the very old English common law style due process system of litigation, the actual enforcement takes a bit of time, but it has come down significantly, and nowadays we can hear arbitration awards being enforced anytime between 6 months to 2 years. Also, Bangladesh has a number of bilateral treaties and investment double taxation agreements. So those are things that Farhan can talk about in a bit more details, and those are also there to offer assistance in structuring investments into Bangladesh. Next slide, please. So what's common when companies come into Bangladesh? They either come in and set up their own subsidiary, or they enter into JV. But a lot of the companies which are not really need to, that don't really have to go into equity participation or JV, they can also establish presence through liaison office, project office, or branch offices, specifically for undertaking projects. Or a lot of the companies that do a lot of procurement for Bangladesh, for example, in the clothing business. I mean, as you may know, Bangladesh is the second largest in the world for clothing manufacturing. And a lot of the big brands, they don't necessarily have their own subsidiary. They have their branch or liaison office, and they coordinate a lot of their procurements and a lot of their activities for quality control in manufacturing and other things through these branch or liaison offices. However, these branch and liaison offices are exemptions to the foreign exchange control laws, and they have certain restrictions on their ability to do everything. So for most companies that have sort of local businesses, local presence, they go through the equity route. Either they have their own 100% subsidiary, or they have joint ventures with Bangladesh companies. Next slide, please. Vate, next one, please. So the other thing that we are going to talk about today, and Farhan is going to talk in a bit more details, is incentives for foreign investors. As I mentioned, that we have BIDA, which is the Designated Government Authority for Promotion of Foreign Investment in Bangladesh. There are also a number of incentive schemes that the government has developed over the years to promote investment in certain sectors. For example, power sector has been for the longest time been very important for the country, and the government allowed a number of incentives such as tax waiver, waiver of income tax, waiver of all sorts of tax on imports, as well as repatriation of dividends. Basically, there was a blanket tax exemption for power projects. There are also other type of incentives, other type of tax exemptions, which Farhan is going to talk about. But also there are a few other things, such as investor services provided by BIDA and other authorities, and they basically assist investors with all their issues and concerns. They provide, they help with the policy advocacy as well as regulatory coordination with other government bodies. For example, if someone needs to coordinate with Bangladesh Bank or SEC or any other regulatory authority, BIDA provides that services. And also there are additional incentives for foreign companies and their employees working in Bangladesh. We can go through this in much more details if you have any specific questions on those. But given that we have only 1 hour today, I'm going to pass it on to Farhan to talk about those things in a bit more details. But before that, I'll just touch upon briefly on some of the sectors that we see a lot of activity in the recent times. Next slide, please, Vate. One of the, apart from the ready-made garments, the other big export from Bangladesh is leather and leather goods. And we are seeing a lot of developments. We are seeing a number of European design houses getting into JVs with Bangladeshi leather and shoe manufacturers. And I think that's a sector that's going to increase exports over the next few years. The other sector that we are seeing a lot of activity in is agribusiness. Because it's a big population, there are a lot of mouths to feed, and agricultural products or agri-security is becoming a big thing. So there is a lot of promotion in this sector from different areas, including the government, and we are seeing a number of foreign investors getting into JVs with local companies in this sector, whether in the seeds, whether in the manufacturing, and more recently we are seeing industrialization or automation of farming equipments and other things. The other sector which has seen a big growth is light engineering, including electronics and machinery, household consumer products, automotive, motorbikes, and the likes. And we have seen a number of Japanese companies coming in and setting up, as well as more recently, Korean companies have set up assembly plants. But what's interesting is that the first few, whether in consumer electronics or in automotive, were local companies that started these businesses. So now they have the foreign investors are coming in and are having to compete there. But at the end of the day, this is a big sector with a huge growth potential. So obviously, we will see more and more in this sector. So along with, and the other one that we have seen a lot of growth is footwear. I mean, as Bangladesh as a population is coming up the value chain in terms of their affordability, we are seeing more demand for consumer products, and footwear is one sector where we have seen tremendous growth, both for local consumption as well as exports. There's one huge setup in Chittagong by a Korean company called Youngwon, and they have 20,000 plus people manufacturing shoes for the likes of Nike and Reebok and other brands. So there's potential for local as well as export markets in the footwear sector. Pharmaceuticals is another sector where we have seen tremendous growth. The local pharmaceutical companies have grown significantly in the last 10 to 15 years, and we have seen them export, and now they're also going to set up in other countries for licensing of their products. And most recently, a few local companies have successfully obtained licenses from the US FDA. And that's a big milestone for this industry, because that means that now they can directly export not just generic drugs, but others as well in those developed markets. And the last one is plastics. I mean, again, the whole world is getting full of plastic products, and Bangladesh is not far behind. Again, for the same reason of people coming up the economic ladder and having higher affordability, the use of plastic products in household plastic products and as well as industrial products is increasing significantly. And we are seeing a number of international players coming in to set up factories to manufacture and develop more complicated plastic products, including auto parts and others. So we will see, apart from some of the other sectors, these are the key sectors that we will see more investments and developments in the coming years. So I think that's all from me. I'll pass it over to Farhan to talk more about tax matters in details.
Thank you very much. So when we think about taxes in Bangladesh, we need to understand that the tax framework in Bangladesh is molded by two key elements, which are industry-specific elements where different sectors have their own specific tax incentives or obligations. For instance, manufacturing entities have their own regulations, which is starkly different from software or tech-based startups. And the second one is government incentives. The government of Bangladesh offers incentives to attract foreign investment. These include tax breaks, import duty waivers, and relaxation of certain regulatory requirements. Apart from this, there are the normal corporate tax elements like corporate income tax, which ranges from 20 to 40% depending on the entity and the type of business. Listed companies in Bangladesh are subject to 20% corporate income tax, whereas cigarette or manufacturers are subject to 45%. The regular corporate income tax for private limited entities is 27.5% currently. And moving on, excuse me, Bangladesh has also implemented a value-added tax system. The standard rate for VAT is 15% currently. Apart from that, we also see reduced rates such as 5%, 7.5%, 10%, or specific VAT, and exports are zero rated. Means when an entity exports goods, they are not required to pay VAT on their output. Coming to withholding taxes, Bangladesh is generally considered a withholding tax regime, and almost all sort of payments are subject to withholding taxes at source. This be it local or foreign. The withholding tax rate can range from 2% to 20%, and in case of outward remittances, where there's a double tax treaty, these rates can be brought down or completely exempted. Capital gains is usually taxed at 15% with subject to waivers or exemptions under special orders or treaties. Import duties apply to all forms of goods that are imported into Bangladesh. But however, where there are bilateral trade treaties such as the SAFTA or NAFTA, these import duties can be reduced. Coming to transfer pricing, Bangladesh introduced its transfer pricing rules back in 2014, which is broadly in line with the OECD guidelines. The related transaction in Bangladesh, which are based on parent subsidiary relationship, common ownership, or joint control. TP in Bangladesh tends to apply to services, sales of goods, and any forms of intercompany loans. The aim here is to ensure that the transaction is being performed at arm's length and that Bangladesh gets its fair share of the taxes from these transactions. Coming to special economic zone, there are various special economic zones in Bangladesh set out all across Bangladesh, and these have their own tax regulations, such as tax breaks, tax incentives with exemption from capital gains tax, and also the tax breaks can range from 5 to 12 years, depending on whether it's a special economic zone or an export processing zone. The government of Bangladesh tends to offer incentives periodically to attract foreign investment in specific sectors, such as export-oriented entities. Bangladesh is, as you all may know, Bangladesh has heavily relied on garments manufacture, and to promote and boost this sector, the government is currently offering them the lowest corporate tax rate, which is 12%, which can go further down to 10% if the factory is a LEED certified green building. We will discuss more on the incentives part in the next slide. And compliance and reporting. As you all know, when the government offers incentives, it will generally want for the corporations to stick to the local laws and regulations, make the regular filings, periodical filings, and that sort of stuff. Next slide, please. So tax incentives. So like I was mentioning in the earlier slide, the government offers tax holidays in various sectors. Currently, Bangladesh has various tax incentives offered in these categories. First is the high-tech park. These are special zones where tech-based industries, specifically information technology, biotechnology, these sort of industries come and set up their facilities and do business. Under the current tax regime, Bangladesh is offering 100% 10 years tax break with 100% exemption in the initial years, which can go down to, which is gradually reduced in the later years. Apart from the tax break, there are also exemptions from capital gains and withholding tax on dividend repatriation. Royalties, technical fees are subject to a lower withholding tax rate. The withholding tax on royalties and technical fees is reduced by 50%. Next is the export processing zone. Depending on the location of the export processing zone, these industries are eligible for 5 to 7 years tax breaks. The next is special economic zones. These come with 10 years tax breaks with 100% in the initial years, which gradually go down. There are also exemptions from capital gains and withholding taxes. And apart from that, if the entity is based in economic zone, remit royalties and technical fee, they are also exempted for a period of 10 years. The next is a very common topic, software. The government of Bangladesh is very keen on boosting this sector. So in this regard, back in 2008 or 9, they brought a specific regulation where income from information technology business is exempted for up to the year ending 30 June 2024, which is basically not that far, but hopefully it is perceived that the government is going to extend this tax break facility. Physical infrastructure facilities, such as, like we have mentioned earlier, we have the first Dhaka elevated expressway now, which is here to alleviate the traffic jam issue. Physical infrastructures, apart from the elevated expressway, include bridges, economic zones, and high-tech park. These sort of developers of these sort of physical infrastructure are also eligible for tax breaks. Industrial undertaking, depending on where these are located, be it Dhaka, Chittagong, Rajshahi, Khulna, they are also eligible for partial tax breaks, which range from 5 to 10%, depending on the location, for a period of 10 years. Now, automobile production. This is a relatively new sector, like Bangladesh is keen again trying to. Bangladesh is very import dependent country, and we have some of the highest import duties on motor vehicles, which can range up to 400%. So it makes automobiles very expensive in Bangladesh. So to reduce the cost and to discourage importing used and refurbished cars, the government is now focusing on automobile production and assembly, where it is offering up to 10 years, 100% tax breaks for the initial 10 years, which can be extended for a further 10 years, where the company will be subject to only a reduced corporate tax of 10%. Next slide, please. So holding structures. When an investor intends to open a subsidiary or company in Bangladesh, they would, of course, look into the tax treaties based on which they can contemplate having a holding company in any geographical area. This can be in Singapore, this can be in Japan, this could be in China. And so far, Bangladesh has concluded 42 tax treaties. The latest one is with Hong Kong, which is a special administrative region of China. And in the table by the side, you can see some of the most in where we see most of the investment in Bangladesh. We have Singapore, we have Netherlands, we have United Kingdom, we have USA, we have Japan, and now Hong Kong. Prior to this Hong Kong treaty coming into effect, people used to ask, does Bangladesh have a treaty with Hong Kong? And my question was no. We have to go with China. So now this is a big thing, and hopefully we'll see more investment coming from Hong Kong now. And the local tax regulations require, like I mentioned in earlier slide, Bangladesh is a withholding tax regime. All forms of payments are subject to withholding taxes at source. So when an investor wants to repatriate the dividends, or if there are intercompany loans where there are interest accruals, or they are charging royalties to their subsidiaries, these can be remitted with exemptions or reduced withholding tax rates. We'll talk about this in the next slide in more detail. Thin capitalization rules. Up until recently, Bangladesh lacked any thin capitalization rule. However, in June of this year, Bangladesh introduced the new Income Tax Act, which became effectively immediate. This new legislation imposes limitations on interest deductibility, where loans obtained from related parties there are caps on loan from related parties. So apart from banks and financial institution, if an Bangladeshi entity obtains loan from their related parties, they will have to face a cap up to 15 lakh, which is approximately $15,000 annually. In any interest in excess of this $15,000 will become a non-deductible expense at the hand of the local entity. However, for interest expense in excess of $15,000, the new law says that there's going to be rules where the approval needs to be sought from the local revenue body, which is the National Board of Revenue. However, no rules are published yet, and we'll have to wait for them to come into effect. And general anti-avoidance rules is something new. Under the new Income Tax Act, the tax authority now has the power to penalize businesses that exploit tax arrangements for unjust tax benefits. In such cases where an SSE is found to obtain such benefits, they can be penalized in the form of income estimation, revenue estimation, gross profit estimation, adjustment of the tax return, cancellation of the rebates, and that sort of stuff. So any investor looking to invest here will need to carefully consider these two crucial aspects, which is the thin capitalization rule and the general anti-avoidance rules.
These are new, right?
These are fairly new. Okay, next slide. So here we'll look at some of the popular holding structures. First slide revolves around dividend. So if we see, I have four holding companies here. One is based in Singapore, one is Japan, one is Hong Kong, one is UAE. If we see it as Singapore, the reduced withholding tax rate under tax treaty between Bangladesh and Singapore would be 15%, which is 10% and for both Japan and Hong Kong. However, UAE has the most favorable tax treaty so far with Bangladesh in terms of dividend, where we have the lowest withholding tax rate of 5%. So if the dividend repatriation is the main concern of an investor, we believe that having a holding company in UAE would be the most advantageous. Next slide, please. So this is about interest and royalty repatriation. Again, we have used three of the common countries, Singapore, Japan, Hong Kong, where each of these kinds of payments will be subject to a reduced withholding tax rate of 10%. However, for Mauritius, the treaty between Bangladesh and Mauritius stipulates that there will be no withholding taxes in Bangladesh in terms of royalty and interest repatriation. However, this may be challenged by the revenue authority because Bangladesh would be keen to have its fair share of the taxes arising out of such income. So this is something that an investor would need to keep in mind when structuring a transaction in this sort of manner. Next slide, please.
But just to mention that we have actually concluded a deal last year for an M&A of a power project asset that was owned through a Mauritius vehicle. The ultimate investors were from elsewhere, but the investments, the holding company, direct holding company for the Bangladesh asset was Mauritius based, and we have concluded the transaction, and everything has gone through smoothly, and the project has also been refinanced. And I guess nothing happened in that because the new laws and the anti-avoidance and others have come in after the close of the transaction. So just to mention that we have not seen any transaction yet under the new anti-avoidance rules.
Exactly. So profit repatriation divestment. When exiting Bangladesh, like we mentioned earlier, Bangladesh has strict foreign exchange control laws, where any form of outward remittance are subject to approval from Bangladesh Bank. Bangladesh Bank approval is not required for non-scheduled payments maintaining Bangladesh Bank approval is specifically required for non-scheduled payments out of Bangladesh, maintaining offshore accounts and doing hedging transactions. However, repatriating dividends and profits are pretty straightforward and just basically require some filing some basic forms of the Bangladesh Bank, which are prescribed. And in terms of share in a share sale scenario, where a foreign investor wants to sell their shares in the local company, they would have to provide a valuation report. Without a valuation report, a registering officer will not execute the registration share sale documents. In Bangladesh, currently, these sort of valuations are done by Bangladesh Bank approved merchant banks and registered chartered accountants. And the most common forms of valuation methods used are asset-based approach, income, discounted cash flow, and market value approach. These are the three forms of valuation methods that we tend to see more commonly. Now coming to offshore indirect transfer, this is something new and very controversial. Up until recently, Bangladesh didn't have these rules, but back in June 2022, under the Finance Act, Bangladesh introduced its first rules to tax such indirect transfers, where ultimate parent company where they have interest in Bangladesh company through a holding company elsewhere would avoid capital gains in Bangladesh. However, these rules have recently been enacted with the aim to tax such transactions. However, with a big however, I'd like to say that these are still very uncertain. We are yet to see how this will be executed, how the revenue authority would tax this, on what kind of valuation they would do this. But because this is very new, we'll have to see. But however, if there's a tax treaty between the company where, like, if
So I'll just supplement Farhan there because we have just done a couple of transactions. So the whole concept of capital gains tax on a sale of a transaction or acquisition of a Bangladeshi company by a foreign company and then subsequent sale and all of that. So the way the capital gains tax is going to be charged on a transaction like that is a relatively new concept. And only in the last 1 or 2 years, we've seen these rules come in, and we have seen a number of transactions executed. And even those, it was quite difficult to, on a practical level, to figure out how the transaction is going to map out, because under the rules, the buyer, which is the foreign entity, is liable to make the payment to the or withhold the capital gains tax on the transaction, and liable to make the payment to the tax authorities. Now, this creates some complication, and nobody was clear how this was going to be done. And also, the other part is that it is possible to get an exemption certificate from the tax authorities on this kind of transactions if there is a double taxation treaty provision between the residents of the buyer company and Bangladesh. Okay, so we have seen some practical aspects of this working out in a few transactions in the last few years, and we've been actively acting on a number of the foreign buyers who have done this, including buyers from Japan, buyers from Singapore, and a number of other European countries. But now with this new rule, where even an offshore sale where there is no share transfer of a Bangladeshi company takes place, even if the ownership change happens a few levels up in the holding structure, there is supposed to be a withholding tax here on that transaction. I guess this is something that's quite common in many developed countries, but for Bangladesh is very new. But what is not clear is how this is going to work. As I mentioned, it was already quite difficult figuring out how it would work in terms of the more simpler structure, where there is a direct transfer of a Bangladesh company shares. The laws or the rules are not clear how this will work out for something like this, a transfer of an offshore holdco. So we are still trying to figure out, we're trying to have a dialogue with the tax authorities and figure out how in practice this will work. Maybe sometime in future we can have another webinar to address this particular issue once we have an answer from the authorities.
With that, I think we can bring this to a close. We are open for question and answers.
Okay, thank you, Shahwar. Thank you, Farhan, for that overview. Certainly, the rules in Bangladesh are quite complex, and I think any investor into Bangladesh needs to take professional counsel and certainly look at things at the planning stage. The introduction of the new capital gains regime is going to create a lot of issues, I think, for people. So it's very important to get the acquisition planning and the international tax planning done correctly as early on as possible. So we've got some questions. So just before we move to the questions, just for the people who are attending, we've recently published a new guide, a tax guide to Bangladesh that's available on our website, or you can contact us directly. It's free of charge, and it gives an overview of some of the stuff that Shahwar was discussing during the webinar today, and also some of the key points that Farhan discussed during his presentation. So regarding questions, the first question that we've received, I think this is to you, Farhan. How new tax law 2003 impact business, specifically the withdrawal of withholding tax exemption on government-approved foreign loan interest? Can you help answer this?
Nice question. So basically, before the Finance Act was came into effect, the government of Bangladesh revoked an SRO, which was issued back in 1976, that exempted interest payments on foreign loans from withholding taxes in Bangladesh. So when this, however, I'd like to inform that there was a clarification from the NBR which stated that if such foreign loans are obtained from a country where there is a double tax avoidance treaty between Bangladesh and the lender's country, this withholding tax exemption would not come into play. Having said that, now coming to the question, what will happen going forward? So this is basically a very contentious issue, and business are actually very worried what's going to happen. So, and even the central bank wrote a letter to the National Board of Revenue asking them to reconsider this move. Until a solution is reached and the NBR reconsider this, basically the cost of borrowing is going to go up as the lenders will want to pass the additional burden onto the borrowers.
And that has, on a practical level, we are already seeing that on a couple of projects, early stage projects that we are working on, and we have seen the sponsors sort of raising this with the concession authorities. We have seen this specifically in two power projects that we are working on, where the foreign sponsors have already raised this with the power development board and the others and the power ministry, and also they are raising this internally for reconsideration. As Farhan mentioned, Bangladesh Bank has already written a letter to the tax authorities to reconsider this, because otherwise this will have a significant impact on the cost of the projects. You're muted, Jack.
Sorry. Thank you, Shahwar. Thank you, Farhan. I think we've enough time for another question. Quite a long question. Is there a prohibition on foreign investors with a wholly owned subsidiary in Bangladesh to purchase products and then directly sell within Bangladesh to another local business? So that's the first part. And then the products are designed offshore and then produced by a Bangladesh producer to spec and then sold to another Bangladesh company. We've heard in the past that such activity will be prohibited as being considered no value added by local authorities. I'm not quite sure I fully understand the question. Maybe
I think so. This is a very specific question. I would, whoever has raised this, I'd request them to contact us directly, because it's not really a specific tax or a sort of general legal question. It's a very specific question about a type of business, probably related to distributorship or others, and this needs to be considered specifically. There's no direct answer. There is a lot of implications. When you import, there is tax and tariffs, and then when you do the local business, there is value-added tax and other things, right? So there are a lot of different parts in this question. I think we'll need more time to answer this. So whoever raised this question, I'll request them to reach out to us directly.
Yeah. So a question for Farhan. Farhan, you mentioned that Bangladesh has concluded quite a lot of double tax agreements with some big economies: USA, UK, the UAE, Singapore, Hong Kong, China, and which is interesting because it's more than what I see in most other Asian countries. But the question is that what's the process for an investor to actually claim relief under? Is it automatic, or do you need to go and make an application, or how does it work in Bangladesh?
Yeah, so basically there would be local withholding taxes when I'm assuming that they are talking about dividends. So the default rate is 20%. However, this can be reduced under tax treaty. However, this is not automatic. You have to apply to the National Board of Revenue, specifying pointing out a specific treaty, the applicable articles, presenting some supporting documents that the investor is actually a shareholder in this company. They need to be able to support their claim that they own this company, and usually it takes around 30 days. And once the approval is provided, the local entity can remit the payments out of Bangladesh following the prescribed channels.
20 days, okay. So
30 days.
Thanks.
30 days.
30 days. Okay. Okay, thanks, Farhan. So thank you, Shahwar, thank you, Farhan, and thank you for everybody for joining. And in the interest of time, there's some more very specific questions that we received. So I would suggest that we will get back to you directly on those. And if anybody else has questions on Bangladesh, if you want a copy of the tax guide, if you want to talk to Shahwar or Farhan on any of the issues that were raised during the webinar today, please reach out to our email addresses are currently on the screen. Please reach out to us directly, and we will look forward to talking to you again. So I wish you a good day, and thank you for joining. And if you've got any specific issues you'd like us to cover during the next webinar, we're always open to suggestions. So please let us know. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.